All right, welcome to another episode of The Fundable Founder. I'm here today with Jason Guss, co-founder and CEO at Iterate Labs. Well, welcome, Jason.
Hey, Charlie. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see you again. It's been a while since we've connected, and I've been following your success from afar, but wanted to reach out because I think you have an interesting story to tell. But first, let's talk a little bit about Iterate Labs. What's your elevator pitch?
Yeah, so we're digitizing workforce motion with wearables and AI to maximize industrial workforce productivity, safety, and training. So we're working with some of the largest manufacturers and food processors in the world, and we help them really better leverage and maintain their most valuable resource, which is their workforce.
So what's an example of what you do, what you're able to track?
Yeah, so safety and preventing injuries is a top problem for manufacturing companies. So we help digitize how workers are moving and give safety managers and ergonomic managers updates if workers are performing in unsafe positions or methods to help prevent those injuries. And then, we'll work with operations and production teams to give insights into cycle time for workers, if the production line is appropriately loaded, if there's any gaps or potential issues for efficiencies, really so you can make proactive intervention and maintain the quality and speed of your overall production and operations.
That's great. And I do remember I spoke to one of your potential customers when I was doing due diligence, and
Yeah.
I asked what the value of Iterate Labs was to them, and he literally said they're going to keep people from maiming themselves and potentially dying. And that hit home. That was one of the more memorable due diligence calls I've ever done.
Yeah, 100%. We're focused on the workers and helping them, and then helping them better integrate kind of into the workforce operation. So it's a win-win.
Great. And so why don't you take us back to your origin story? What's your background and what made you get into this business and start this business?
Yeah, so my background and my whole family are in really like orthopedics and biomechanics. So brother's orthopedic surgeon, dad was a chiropractor. I did my PhD in biomechanics and orthopedics related research. So really focused on like injury prevention, human performance, and understanding kind of how the body interacts with the physical world. And so meeting my co-founder, who was a collaborator on my first research paper doing the PhD, we got talking, spent lots of hours in kind of the basements of Wall Hall over at Cornell. And we realized, combining our expertises and experiences, he has a lot of experience on the digital manufacturing side and actually working in manufacturing companies throughout his younger life, that we can apply technology and our insights to really help the workforce perform better, and that workplace injuries, as well as just kind of better managing workforces, was not something that had to be so difficult if we could leverage some new technologies, wearables, AI, and things like that. So we started kind of in the basements during our PhD at Cornell, and we went full time as soon as we finished that, and been hitting the ground running ever since.
What did you do along the way to convince yourself that this is the path you wanted to take, right? I mean, I'm guessing a lot of people don't get their PhD thinking they're going to start a startup, a wearable startup.
Yeah, so that was never that was never my expectation early on. But within the first year or two, I kind of knew deep down that research in this setting was not what was going to motivate me and kind of keep me satisfied long term. So I started broadening out. I actually worked as one of the first engineers at a robotics company in the evenings for a year during my PhD. Fell in love with entrepreneurship. Took a course that was entrepreneurship for engineers. Fell in love more. And basically, I worked at that startup for a year. They did really well. Ended up moving to Austin, raising a big fund. I decided, at this point, I should probably still finish my PhD. And a week later, after they moved and I left them, I started this company. So kind of getting exposed to the principles of entrepreneurship and really being in control of your destiny and being able to have a big impact were some of the things that really drew me into it.
Was there anything else you learned about how to think about growing your company while working at that robotics company? Was there anything you kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, there's just a lot of core like fundamentals and principles that you think of like, minimum viable product. It was a hardware company, so there's a lot you learn about trying to build and found a hardware company, the nuances that come with that. And just working with like an early stage like team, how to manage them and how to align your vision to hit kind of the most important first goals are kind of difficult because early on there can feel like there's a million things that have to get done all
Right.
simultaneously. There's a lot of chicken and egg problems that don't really change no matter what stage you're at.
Right.
And so I think really understanding those and just being exposed to that gives you a little bit more confidence that every company goes through those kind of initial growing pains.
So you launch a week after leaving that company. What was your strategy for figuring out how much of your product to develop, how much of your team to add, how much customer traction you needed, all with, the idea of raising money, right? Like, how did you balance all those things?
Yeah, early on, you have to be really focused. Early on, you're also pretty inexperienced, so you definitely have to leverage your advisors and mentors. And I think having kind of predefined specific goals as well as any specific fundraising that's associated with that has to be pretty tightly aligned. So we're going to raise this amount to accomplish this goal that increases our value this much. That will then allow us to attract more customers or will allow us to raise more money. So you kind of just can't say, hey, we're going to raise an arbitrary amount of money to do an arbitrary thing. You have to be pretty focused there. Luckily, we went through an initial accelerator program, and then we went through like the eLab. That's Cornell's like student startup accelerator program. So we had some guidance and mentorship. The first thing is really validating that you have a problem to solve, and then who the customer is. So that's something we were able to do early on, and luckily we're able to leverage relationships and in some cases just reach out on I think I've told you this, on the Contact Us portal.
That's right.
Some pretty major companies and find out that there actually was interest and that this was a big problem to solve. So yeah, without naming names of companies that, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, we reached out on Contact Us portals and, found back within a week from corporate safety and other folks that, hey, this is a big problem we're trying to solve. And, that kind of was the match that kind of lit the fire that, hey, this is a big problem. This is something we should devote time and effort into.
That's great. Yeah. And I've had other founders say, don't be afraid to just cold outreach. It doesn't always have to be a warm introduction. And if your customer really does have that big pain point, they'll respond. Yeah. And that's how you really know what you got.
Yeah, one of the pieces of advice I'll give to early entrepreneurs too that unfortunately I can no longer leverage is when you're a student, there's this openness where people are willing to respond and mentor and advise you. And it also takes away some of the salesiness that can be kind of put people off if you reach out to them. So if you're a student and you're actually trying to sell them, but you reach out as like, hi, I'm a student at XYZ University. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this topic. I'm trying to understand this better for a project. That can really open doors and get the ground going. And those early conversations are what's really important for framing the product and what you design.
Definitely. And so when did you decide to set out and start raising some money around this?
So we've been doing this for a couple of years now. First thing we set out to raise money was we got an initial grant through New York State, and then we got some initial funding through some early stage investors. That was really to help us build out like an MVP prototype.
Okay.
That was very much the first stage, kind of validating that, we had some initial validation that this is something customers would want, that this could be turned into a business. And now we need just some initial, I think the first amount we raised was maybe 150K to kind of validate that, hey, we can do this product. We can get some early testing proofs, from the customer that this has valuable data or value there. That was very much how we first framed it. And that was the very first funding that we did.
So those first investors, they were betting on you guys. They were investing in you.
Yeah. Of course.
And how did you think about, you must have had to sell them on the vision of what this could be.
Yeah,
And
very
so
much early on.
how did you do that?
Yeah, very much early on. It's, they're investing in the team and they have to believe in you, because there's a million reasons why you can fail, but only a few why you end up succeeding. And it's up to the team to kind of get you there. So from that perspective, I think, demonstrating confidence in who we were and our credentials and our backgrounds. But I think putting in the work and diligence to show, hey, we've had these customer conversations, here's how we've narrowed it down. Here's the product we can develop. Here's why, we're uniquely able to do this. And here's why we can do this and turn this into a business. That's really kind of the core components. That's a couple of years back, so I don't remember that as fresh as like our seed round, to be honest. But those would be some of the first things. Like, as the CEO, founder, fundraiser, you've got to be good at sales if it makes you uncomfortable. So just keep trying to sell people and pitching until you start feeling comfortable.
And if I remember correctly, and I hope I have this right, didn't you do some like stand-up comedy or something along the way and that helped build your confidence in your pitch?
Yeah, the pandemic set it back, but I still do like improv.
Okay.
Stuff like that. Yeah. So that's more of like a passion thing for me, but it helps so much with presenting, communication. And I was big on that at Cornell. Like, I won the 3-minute thesis competition at Cornell, which was all about communicating your research to the general public.
Okay.
And so that's communication, something I've always really valued. And I think no matter what industry you do, no matter what your role, it's a core component. So I'd say focus on that, focus on your presentation skills and thinking through the lens of the person you're speaking with. Because that's all it is. You could have the same company and 10 people talk about it 10 different ways, but one of those is getting funding.
That's exactly right. And, I think these days, I've had some entrepreneurs tell me that when they're pitching on Zoom, they'll record themselves so they can actually watch the film afterwards, like, a professional athlete would, and critique their own performance and where they needed to do better. Yeah. And I had another entrepreneur tell me, fundraising is a lot like theater, right? You got to really understand your audience and you got to know how to tell that story in the way that gets people to really believe in you.
I bought a couple of books actually on storytelling too, because that's all it is. You're telling an engaging story that they'll remember. And you also have to know the process of, like with VCs, right? They'll have a partner meeting, right? Where that partner is going to try to convince the other partners that this is a good idea, right? And so if your thing is very complex and they can't walk away with a few sentences of what they do and why it's, valuable, they're not going to be able to convince other people. And then you're already falling short, right? So make sure they walk away with a crystal, clear message, and then know the stages. I have some other advice, but know the stages, know the process, and you'll have to keep momentum going throughout that entire fundraising process. Like, every week, hit them with a new update. And like, hey, this positive thing happened, this positive thing. So you got to be persistent.
Did you, in those updates, did you tell them negative things as well? Was that, or did you try to keep it mostly positive?
Yeah, I'd say mostly positive. I guess, for me, it's, at the end of the day, the people making the decisions they're still humans, right? They're people. And so, I think you have to understand kind of, I guess, sales and dealing with people and how to best position that. So from my perspective, we kept it typically positive in our follow-ups and engagements. If they want to do diligence and come up with, if there's any shortcomings or negative, that's fine. But I wasn't going to reach out and, specifically tell them negative things.
What do you remember those books you read about storytelling, what they were called?
I don't know. I think one might have been like The Art of Storytelling or something. Okay. Cliche,
Storytelling for Dummies, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, there's just, I do some other writing and stuff on the side too. So there's just understanding just storytelling and like those common things I think are really important, and on just understanding basic communication. So
how did you go about understanding kind of the VC and angel landscape and who to approach? And, you said understand like, what stage they invest in and what types of products, and how'd you go about researching that and figuring it out?
It's very time consuming. It's not sexy. It's, you know, you got to put in the work. And like, that's anyone trying to fundraise needs to understand that it's time consuming and it's a lot of work. You know, you do research. There's a few tools out there now that can help sort it, or you can find lists, and some accelerators might have a list of a bunch of VCs in a spreadsheet that you can sort through and look. So it's a lot of networking. It's a lot of research online, keyword searching. You know, it's about finding companies that, not companies, but investors that invest at the right stage, investors that invest in your focus area. Though it's a little nuanced, because if they're too close and they've invested in something
Right.
that's too similar, then they're not going to invest. So there's like this very strange, you know, balance. Sometimes I'll find, oh, this is a perfect investor, and then like they've invested in our exact competitor. So it's like,
Right.
okay, damn. So it's tough. It takes lots of time, lots of hours, but I'd say put in the effort to building up that spreadsheet, and then you got to monitor that process. So I mean, I've spoken for our seed round. We spoke to probably like 200 to 300, you know, VCs.
Wow.
Like, you just have to put in the number. And since we had some, you know, we're transitioning away from like our hardware towards like our Series A, but like earlier stages when we were more hardware focused. There's much less investors that invest in hardware. So that's already a tougher, more narrow funnel. And so just being cognizant of that, and it's a numbers game. I honestly, I remember from when we were speaking with you, you told me, I think something like you made maybe 300 companies a year and you invest in 3. So even if you're a rock star and you're one of those 3, you still have a 1% chance.
That's exactly right.
And so off the bat, you have to talk to at least 100 VCs if you're that one company that's lucky enough to get an investment, right? So you do the math, and you got to speak to at least 100, if not, you know, a few hundred, and keep track of those pitches, like you said early on. Very early on, do A/B testing. Kind of,
Yep.
you're not going to know the perfect way to tell your story, but you can start keeping track of, when I present this part this way, it advances to the next reason. When it doesn't, and then feel free to ask VCs for feedback and advice. Some aren't as nice. Like you guys were very nice, and so I think I'd feel more comfortable asking for honest feedback. Like some VCs I've turned into advisors and mentors,
Yep.
and it's nice to have them on your side, and then they make intros for us kind of later on. So
That's great. And, you know, and a lot of those things you touched on will help differentiate the company when they're pitching, right? So you do have to, your competition is the 99 other companies that are pitching for the one investment I'm going to make, and doing things, you know, that make you stand out are important. I can't tell you how many people come in and pitch, and their first question is, so tell me about Mass Ventures. What do you invest in? It's like, better if you said, hey, I noticed you invested in Fair Market, for example, and you know, I find that interesting because X, Y, and Z, and I think that's similar to our story and why we approached you. That's a big difference.
What I came into you guys with was like, you invested, I think you invested in sound machines or sight machines.
Yeah, we through our start program we had some stuff, and you know, it made sense. And, you know, you really stood out as one of the founders that we talked to that was just really well prepared, very thoughtful, did your homework, and that stands out. And then, you know, you really, the other thing that differentiated you was you had some really interesting customer traction, right? You had some big name companies that were really interested in working with you, who gave you great reviews. So just a really great all-around team. Any kind of other final pieces of advice about fundraising? You know, whether, you know, how do you, like, whatever it might be, but how did you get kind of that first term sheet when you were raising that round? Was there anything you did or did it just kind of come together?
It's just takes hard work, diligence, persistence, and the toughest thing I'd say for young entrepreneurs is, even if you can get everyone aligned in the timeliness of things, and the forcing kind of VCs to understand that the timing to invest is now, not 3 months from now, not 6 months from now. Because if they can wait and invest later and see more traction and progress, they will. So that's, you know, I still have trouble with that. And that's something you need to focus on for your customer sales and for your, you know, investment sales. But the urgency of now is something that needs to be communicated, and you need to have a good reason why they need to make a decision now. Also, just know the process with VCs too. Some will say like, we meet someone and within 2 weeks we decide. Some say we invest 3 months after we first meet them. So you're building a relationship. So be aware of that going in, and don't set your expectations. And then also set aside at least 6 months to fundraise. Like it's going to take a while. Only other advice I'll say is angel groups, I would try to steer away from in general. You have way too many cooks in the kitchen, and only one of them can throw off the other 49 people that want to invest. I'd say pick off individual angels, so to speak, not to sound too like, but focus on individual investor that can make the decision for themselves, because that's one person you need to convince, not 50. And like with a VC, right, when there's maybe 3 people that are making the decision, maybe 5, that's easier to convince them than it does for an angel group of 50 people. So that's my 2 cents on that front.
Any advice about, did you do any partner meetings where you had to pitch to the whole partner group at venture capital firms?
Definitely. Definitely. I think you just have to come across as confident. Like take control of the room, and the first few times you might fumble depending upon who you are, but you just got to keep doing it. And
yeah, you can't be intimidated by it, right? You got to come in just thinking like, we're going to be partners in this business, and so we're at the same level. And
you need to strongly believe that you're providing them a great opportunity, and that you're an amazing startup to invest in. That's the next unicorn. That's the resource here. There's tons of VCs, so you got to have that mindset going in.
Well, this has been really great advice. Thank you for sharing your story, Jason. Yeah. I like to finish with one question though, and that's, how do you describe yourself in one word?
Oh man. I guess it doesn't sound that fun, but I guess like diligent.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with diligent or creative. But
diligent and creative, those don't seem like the same thing.
Yeah, running a startup and doing the PhD, and then I do improv comedy. So I'm a bit of a confusing individual.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jason. Good luck with everything with Iterate Labs. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it.
To innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.